If Moses didn't exist, the Pentateuch shouldn't work. Not spiritually, structurally. This text is packed with hundreds of anchors to real places, real peoples, and real geography. They don't float independently, they interlock. And Moses isn't decorative, he's load bearing. Remove him, and the explanation collapses. So the real question isn't, can archaeology prove Moses? It's this: if Moses is fictional, what explains this text at all? Most debates about Moses start in the wrong place. They ask, is there a name on a stone somewhere that says Moses? That's not how ancient history works. The real question is simpler and harder. What kind of process produces a text like this? When you actually read the Pentateuch, all 5 books, you start to notice something. The text constantly touches reality. Named places, named peoples, political regions, geography that only makes sense on the ground. And these details don't sit in isolation. They stack. They cross-reference. They depend on each other. Here's where it gets interesting. You can explain one anchor away, maybe 2. But when you have hundreds, possibly thousands, and they all hold together, the explanation space collapses fast. At that point, you're not asking, is this story inspiring? You're asking, why doesn't this system fall apart? And that brings us to Moses. Moses is not a mascot. He's not a legend pasted on later. He's not interchangeable. He sits at the center of the system. Laws flow through him. Narrative depends on him. Covenant authority runs through him. Remove Moses, and you don't just lose a character, you lose the entire architecture. So there are only 2 real options. Either Moses is a historical origin figure whose memory holds this system together, or this text is a miracle of accidental coherence, with hundreds of reality anchors lining up by chance across centuries with no competing origin story ever replacing him. Those are not equal explanations. In the next few minutes, we're going to walk through the anchors, the places, the names, the interlocks, and then we'll do the math on what it costs to remove Moses from the system. Let's start with the least controversial anchors, geography. The Pentateuch is not set in a vague mythic landscape. It moves through real regions, Egypt, Canaan, the Transjordan, through deserts, river valleys, and borderlands. And the geography isn't ornamental, it constrains the story. More importantly, the geography behaves correctly. The narrative slows where movement would slow. It bottlenecks where terrain bottlenecks. Myths compress geography. This text does not. Then there are the people groups: Moab, Edom, Amalek, Midian. These aren't cardboard villains. They have territories, boundaries, political friction. And here's what most people miss. These anchors interlock. Places explain laws. Conflicts explain commands. Geography explains decisions. Remove one piece, the others start to wobble. And then there are names, peripheral figures, outsiders, people who appear once, yet sit inside the same geopolitical web. At least one of those names appears outside the Bible, in an inscription, in the same region, in the same political world. That doesn't prove the story, but it locks the text into reality. But none of these anchors explain themselves. They're organized. And the organizing principle isn't geography or theology, it's transmission. Someone is carrying law, memory, and authority through all of it. If Moses is fictional, you need another explanation that does all of this. One that knows the terrain, preserves hundreds of constraints, and never replaces Moses, and leaves no trace of itself. That's not impossible, but it's expensive. One removed explanation becomes 10 new assumptions. 10 become dozens, and the explanation starts to outweigh the thing it's trying to explain. So now we're going to treat this like an engineered system, and we're going to put the numbers on the cost. Before we do any math, let me be clear. We're not trying to prove Moses. We're asking what explanation fits the data with the least strain. Two explanations. One, Moses is real and the text preserves his legacy. Two, Moses is fictional and the text was assembled later and attributed to him. Which one has to work harder? Constraints defined. The evidence isn't one thing. It's categories: geography, peoples, names, inscriptions. A 5-book system that collapses if Moses is removed. Each one is a constraint. Here's the asymmetry. If Moses is real, none of this is surprising. But if Moses is fictional, every constraint becomes a separate problem. 1 constraint is manageable, 2 are harder, 3 harder still. Each one multiplies the difficulty. Let's be conservative. Suppose each constraint only slightly favors a real Moses. Just twice as likely. That's a very modest advantage. 1 constraint, 2 to 1. 2, 4 to 1. 3, 8 to 1. 4, 16 to 1. 5, 32 to 1. That means this text is at least 30 times more likely to exist in this form if Moses is real than if he's fictional. This doesn't depend on belief. Even skeptical starting points collapse once enough constraints stack up. Systems don't fail gracefully when you remove their central component. They collapse. The claim isn't certainty, it's this. As anchors increase, fiction becomes exponentially expensive. And that leads to the most important question of all. What would actually prove this wrong? Because if nothing could, this wouldn't matter. Falsification means discovering something that explains the data better. A credible alternative origin figure, named, grounded, capable of replacing Moses structurally. None exists. An early Israelite legal system that functions without Moses. Same authority, same structure, no Moses. That would be devastating. Evidence that Moses is a removable overlay. If Moses could be cleanly removed without breaking the text, model fails. If geography, peoples, and inscriptions all failed together, not individually, the constraint model would weaken. These falsifiers could exist, but their absence after centuries of scrutiny is itself data. The model doesn't claim certainty, it claims survival under pressure. If Moses is fictional, the text should be easier to explain, but the more carefully you look, the harder it gets. So take this with you. The question isn't whether Moses can be proved like a lab result. It's whether removing him actually improves the explanation. And so far, the opposite keeps happening. If you want the follow-up, the next video applies this same framework to another ancient figure, no special pleading. And if this kind of analysis is useful, subscribe. Not for answers, but for better questions.